Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly Horticulture Town Hall. We have a lot of good information for you today. Just letting you know this is being live streamed in case you want to watch it again. We will give you more information later in the town hall about how to find that live stream. My name is Donna Offenberg and I am your host for today. I am located in the southeast region of Missouri down by Cape Girardeau. Other specialists that are joining us today include Jennifer Shooter out of Kirksville, Debbie Kelly out of Hillsboro, Kathy Meacham out of Carrollton, Kelly McGowan from Springfield, Tamara Rial from Kansas City, and from MU campus, we have Lee Miller, Jared Fogue, and Pat Guinan. Kathy has changed her name to Ask Your Questions Here. So anytime during the town hall, if you have a question, please send them to her. Make sure you include your email address so that if we do run out of time to answer those questions, that someone will be in touch with you to get an answer for it. We are going to start with our weather report from Pat Guinan.
Sounds good, Donna. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Well, we're in the full throngs of summer with the heat and humidity. If we can just hold on a couple more days, I think we have a pretty nice weekend shaping up. But let's look back through the past week. The rainfall, this is a radar estimates of rainfall across Missouri. It's been somewhat of a hit and miss, scattered variety, but any areas that you see in the shades of green or darker greens and yellows, that's where the heaviest precip fell over the past week. North central parts of the state, some good totals around in here in Adair County, over into Lynn and parts of northern Sheridan County, received over 2 inches according to these radar estimates. Parts of northeast, east central, and southeast, south central Missouri also saw some decent rainfall. I put some rain gauge reports on the table that you see here below, and Houston and Texas County, over 3 inches of rain. It actually was getting dry in parts of south central Missouri, so it was welcome relief for that area of the state. And looking at some other areas, parts of southeast and northeast Missouri, some other totals in excess of 2 inches. But you know, some areas have not been receiving the rainfall over the past week or over the past few weeks for that matter. This looks back over the past 30 days. There are some drier locations here in Missouri, in particular west central, northwestern parts of the state. This is percent of normal precip over the past 30 days. And you can see this red area here is less than 25% of normal. So the topsoils are drying up in parts of northwest Missouri around St. Joe, south of Kansas City, and east over to not too far from Columbia. We've been pretty dry over the past few weeks. And again, you can see the wetter areas in the blues and greens, northeast, east central, southeast Missouri. There's a little bit of a line here of heavier precipitation that extends from near St. Genevieve, St. Francis County over to Laclede County and into St. Clair County. They've had some decent rainfall, but some areas are pretty dry as well. It's interesting to note a lot of these thunderstorms that have been firing up, they've been getting their act together, developing across generally the eastern third of the state, but really bringing some decent rain across parts of central and southern Illinois as they congealed and became more widespread and heavier in that part of the state. I put some tables showing rainfall, who's been getting the high amounts over the past 30 days in the lower left, and then the areas of west central Missouri, again, where it's been very light over the past 4 weeks, generally only 1/3 of an inch in parts of Lafayette and Johnson County, generally just around 1/2 inch in Ray, Clinton, Jackson, Andrew County. They could really stand to use some more rainfall. Hopefully with rain chances over the next few days, we can help make up some of that deficit that they've been seeing in that part of the state. I think the big story over the next couple of days is, of course, the heat and humidity. Really high dew points in the 70s today. Temperatures at noon are generally in the upper 80s, even some lower 90s. In combination with these dew points, they're going to go well into the hundreds today for heat indices. That's why we see here on the upper right, all this orange area in much of the Midwest. That's a heat advisory. And you can look here in Missouri, that heat advisory is in effect until 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. These little bright areas of red or pinkish color here, it's in the metropolitan areas of St. Louis and Kansas City where those heat indices could be approaching 110 degrees or higher today. So please be aware of these dangerous conditions. You don't want to be out in the elements too long, especially out in the sun. If you are, to try to find as much shade as possible and drink plenty of water. Again, it's the next couple of days that we're going to see these high heat and humidities that we are anticipating a cold front. Currently in Iowa, will slowly move southward today, tomorrow, and into Friday morning. And in the lower panel here, you can see these are the high temperatures in the lower left for today. And as we go into the weekend, much more pleasant conditions. Again, for today and tomorrow, highs in the mid 90s across much of the state. But look at these high temperatures on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As that cold front begins to make its southward progress through Missouri, that will bring some cooler temperatures as well as lower humidities. Instead of having dew points in the 70s, they will be in the 60s. And it's going to feel really nice considering what we've been experiencing over the past few days. So I'm really looking forward to this weekend. This is a forecast over the next 3 days of precipitation. Take it with a grain of salt. It's a very general, localized information, and they're indicating over the next 3 days, especially beginning tonight, tomorrow night, and into Friday morning, the highest likelihood of heavy precipitation will be across the northern half of the state on into Illinois, anywhere from about a half to as much as 2 inches anticipated. Lighter amounts as you go into the southern parts of Missouri. But again, anywhere those thunderstorms fire up over the next few days, of course, it could be localized heavier amounts, especially across southern half of the state. I think the best chances for precipitation statewide will be coming tomorrow night as that front attempts to make its slow progression southward through the state. That'll carry along with it the chances of showers and thunderstorms. So our best chances in northern Missouri will start up tonight and on into tomorrow night, and that will slide southward into tomorrow night and Friday morning over southern parts of Missouri for the best rain chances. Again, a nice weekend shaping up. Depending on where that front hangs up, if it stalls out in southern Missouri, there could be some day-to-day chances of showers and thunderstorms on Saturday and Sunday. So something to keep an eye on, whether how far south that front makes it through our state. But for next week, it does look like on the left, a higher likelihood of above normal temperatures in the upper Midwest, near normal to maybe a slightly enhanced likelihood of above normal temps across northern Missouri. And then on the right, this deeper shades of green are the complements of the tropical system, Tropical Storm Fred, which currently is around Puerto Rico. That is forecast to make it into near the Florida Keys by this weekend and perhaps start impacting the southeastern U.S. early next week with heavier tropical-like precipitation. Here in Missouri, it does look like near normal chances of precipitation may be slightly enhanced across southeastern Missouri due to the impacts of that tropical system. But for the rest of the state, there are indications of another system, perhaps by Tuesday into middle part of next week, that will bring us some better chances of showers and thunderstorms as we go through much of next week. So looking forward to the weekend, Donna, with some more pleasant temperatures, lower humidities, but please be aware of the next couple of days. It's going to be pretty brutal in regard to the temperature and high heat indices. Thank you so much, Donna. I'll hand it back over to you.
Sure has been brutal on that humidity. I know that a lot of the garden produce, though, because the heat is coming on quick and it's ripening fast. So keep an eye on those gardens and get things picked in a timely manner, but don't strain yourself too much and protect yourself from the sun and the heat. Just as an example, I picked 4 gallons of tomatoes in the last couple of days, and I spent yesterday processing, and so it's just amazing how much produce is coming up off pretty quick. So at this point, I will turn it over to Jennifer as your moderator.
Hey, thank you, Donna. And we've got a lot of questions and topics that we want to cover today. So we'll get right into this with our first question. And it is, my Kennebec potatoes yielded very small potatoes. What did I do wrong? Also, I discarded about half of my yield as potatoes had some small amounts of green on them. Could I have cut out the green areas and then eaten the potatoes? Debbie, would you like to answer this, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And potatoes are one of my favorites. My sister and I fight over it if we have all gratin potatoes. So I love those potatoes. Potatoes can come in different colors, different sizes. And so the potatoes are just fun to talk about. So I enjoy talking about the potatoes and of course eating them. So let's look at small potatoes. So potatoes actually, when we look at the size, they can come in different sizes depending upon what the variety is. It is not uncommon for a potato plant to have some larger tubers, medium-sized tubers, and small tubers, because that's just normal for how that plant grows. And again, as I said, the tubers can depend upon the size, depending upon the variety that you're actually growing. If by chance the potatoes are all one size more or less and they're all very small, chances are there could be numerous different reasons for that, and we'll talk about it here shortly. But the main thing is the variety. Did you buy a variety where they're going to be smaller size tubers? And Kennebec is not. Growing issues, something that might have happened or could not have happened depending upon how the plant was growing through the season. And then harvest timing is very important on the size of when the tubers, how they develop. So when we're looking at potato issues in particular, if it's a variety where they're not small and they're going to have large, medium, and small on it as a normal plant would be, some things that you need to take into consideration are that the tuber actually needs to have about 2 inches of water per week, and that helps to build up the bulk of the size of that particular tuber itself. During tuber development, they don't really like the heat and the drought. So if we've gone through a period of time where there hasn't been a lot of rain, which in most cases in Missouri this year, we probably have had plenty of rain, although I know different areas haven't had a lot of rain. So if you're not keeping up with about 2 inches of water per week, it could be that those tubers weren't developing because they didn't have enough moisture. If you do too much of a fertilizer with nitrogen in it, nitrogen has a tendency to make those plants, all plants, have better foliar growth. And a tuber is not, of course, foliage, and so they're not going to develop as well. The tuber is more of an underground stem is actually what that is. So because it is underground, it also does need to have some phosphorus and potassium. So checking and doing a soil test to verify that your nutrient levels are in a good growth for plants would be really good. So you might want to consider doing a soil test. Potatoes do need to be in full sun in order for them to grow exceptionally well. And in general, for most vegetables, you need a minimum of 6 hours, and they really prefer to have about 8 hours of direct sunlight. You can also, if you overcrowd those plants and put them too close together, they do also have a tendency from that overcrowding of not developing and growing as big as a normal plant would be, which then means that the tubers are not going to grow very large either. And another reason could be that you harvest the plant actually too soon, and that a lot of times could be an issue. So let's look at harvesting potatoes. You can harvest potatoes early, and those are called new potatoes. So there is no specific variety that is really called a new potato. There might be varieties that have really small development of those tubers, and they could be considered new potatoes. But if you've got a regular potato plant, if you harvest them 7 to 8 weeks after you actually plant them, the tubers are going to be small, and you can go ahead and harvest those. There's nothing wrong with those, and they'll be considered new potatoes. So farmers markets, generally, those farmers will have potatoes earlier, and they're going to be much smaller because they want to get a jump on the market for those that are interested in purchasing potatoes. For regular sized tubers, you usually go anywhere between 90 to 100 days before you harvest. And that really is dependent upon the specific variety of what you're growing. So let's talk about the actual harvesting. So you can check the maturity of those potatoes. And what you can do is go ahead and dig some out of those mounds and pull up those tubers. If the skin is very thin, and if it rubs off easy with rubbing with your thumb across it, chances are they're not going to be fully mature. And if they're not fully mature, they will not store very well, but they're okay to eat. Now, I do understand that there are some varieties that have a thin skin. And so you just need to use your own judgment as to whether or not that skin is really extra thin and it's not quite mature yet. Again, you can eat them at that stage. That's not a problem. In general, the potato plant is going to bloom. After it's done blooming, the vines will begin to turn yellow and they will dry and die back. They may even fall over. And at that point, from the time they start to turn yellow on, is the time when you can start actually harvesting those potatoes. So preventing potatoes from turning green, because that was the second part of that question, you want to make sure, and the reason why they turn green is because they're exposed to sunlight. So as those plants are growing, we continue to mound up soil around the base of that plant so that if the tubers are close to the top of the soil line, they won't be exposed to the sun at all. Different varieties have more sensitivity to the light. So if they have a lighter skin, such as the yellows, they're going to be turn green more readily. I'm sorry. So make sure that all the tubers are under the soil. Make sure that they're growing well. When you do harvest the potatoes, store them in dark, cool location. Make sure there's good air circulation. And I believe a couple weeks ago, Kelly talked about harvesting potatoes. And then we're looking at the green potatoes. So what is the green on the potatoes? It actually is chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is what makes plants green. But when it's on the tuber, it actually shows us or represents to us that there is another type of a chemical there, and it's called solanine. Solanine is actually a toxic substance. Excuse me. It's actually a toxic substance, and what that does is it aids resistance to the insects and to other critters that are in the soil. It has a bitter taste to them, so it's kind of like protection for the tuber so that animals and insects don't eat it. If we as humans do eat that green area of a potato, it's just going to cause us some stomach symptoms such as vomiting and potential diarrhea if you're eating it in large amounts. What you can do is just take that green portion and cut it off of the tuber, and you're perfectly fine eating the rest of that tuber. There's not a problem with that. It's only where it's green. And that's all that I have at this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. We will now move on to our weekly friend or foe.
Thank you. So here we go. Everybody go ahead and access. Well, let's see. Yep, there you go. The poll is activated. So you tell me, is this a friend or foe?
Sorry, Tamara, I'm not seeing the poll. Oh, there it is.
Is it there? Okay, great. And in case you are on our live stream, hopefully you can see it now too. You may not be able to participate, but at least you will see what we're seeing. And I'll give you a couple more seconds. All right, here we go. I'm going to end the poll and then I'm going to share the results. There we go. So this was another kind of tricky one. We have people all over the board. And I am going to let you know that there's good reason for this. So let's see what I chose. I actually said it depends. It's both a friend, it's a foe, it's neutral, it's kind of all over the board. These are ants, of course, and ants, it kind of depends on what the situation is, whether it's a pest, friend, or a neutral insect. Most commonly, it's just a neutral insect. So ants can be a pest if they invade our spaces and they get into our food. They can also be a health risk if they bite or sting us. They can also be a pest when they farm aphids, or they can, because aphids can vector diseases and decrease the health of our garden plants. And then ants are predators, so they can also eat other arthropods, and so in that way they're a friend. They can also feed on nectar and unintentionally become a pollinator. So in that case, they can be a friend. Most of the time, they're just neutral. So they're neither a friend or foe. They are, we have more than 450 species of ants that live in North America. There's less than 50 of those species that are known to invade homes across the US, but here in Missouri, we only have about 10 of these species that enter our homes. So that's what I have for friend or foe. It really depends. It depends on the situation. Most of them are neutral, though there definitely are some that are pests, and there's some that actually are helping us out. So with that, I'm actually going to go on to answer some questions. This friend or foe segment from this week was recommended by one of our viewers. So I just want to also point out, if you have an insect that you'd like to have us spotlight, please let us know. You can submit that through the regular way to register for the program. So the participant who submitted this recommendation also mentioned that they're constantly being bitten while in the garden, and they thought that it might be ants, but it might be something else. So this is a pretty common question. How do I recognize if what I'm dealing with is actually an ant? And then, of course, if ants are being a pest, how do I manage them? So we're going to spend a little time on how to recognize ants, and then also to talk about the integrated pest management, or IPM, of ants. So first, how do I recognize an ants? So if you happen to see ants scurrying about in a straight line from here to there, whether that's in your garden or it's in or on your house, they're fairly easy to recognize. But if you have a single individual, it becomes a little trickier, especially when they have wings, because ants can easily be confused with winged termites and also wasps. Ants are eusocial insects. That means that they live in colonies. There can be thousands of individuals. Most of them are females, and there's a reproductive queen who is responsible for laying all the eggs. And this, about once a year, winged ants, both male and female, they merge from the colony to start new colonies. So let's look at ants and termites to learn how to tell the difference. So ants, this is an ant right over here, and this is a termite right here. Ants have elbowed antennae, and this is in comparison to straight antennae that termites have. Something else that's interesting is termites, all of these little segments look like little spheres that are glued together, and they don't have a definite segment where they would bend. Whereas on the ant, there is definitely a segment where it can bend. Another characteristic is ant wings have they have 4 wings, so 2 pairs of wings, but the first pair on ants is long and the second pair is short. The second pair don't usually go past the abdomen, or not very far past the abdomen, but the first pair might actually go past. This is in comparison to the termites, which both of their pairs of wings are equal in length, and they both go well past the abdomen. The third characteristic that I look for when I'm trying to distinguish between ants and termites is the waist. So ants have a very slender waist compared to termites, which they are pretty much broad throughout. Now, this definitely gets a little more tricky when we're talking about ants versus wasps, because they're both in the same order, Hymenoptera. And so they're going to have a lot of characteristics that are similar. So we'll go back to this image and I can point out these traits again. So we have elbowed antennae. Now in this case, they're not really bent, but they can be. You usually don't have to wait very long if you're watching them to see if they bend. This is a better example of where you can see this elbowed antennae. Now with this ant, you're not really able to see that second pair of wings, but if you were to actually handle it a little bit, you're going to see it. I can see in this image, because it's wonderfully nice and clear, but there is that second wing right here. On this side, and then it's right here on the other side. So the ant's wings definitely are different in size, a great characteristic. And then you can also see right down here that the waist is very thin. Okay, so now that you can identify that you're dealing with an ant, oh, and I didn't mention, compared to wasps are going to have a more readily available stinger that you can see. That doesn't mean that they're actually stinging you. A lot of the really small really small wasps are parasites on, or they're stinging tiny little other insects. So they're beneficials in our garden. We really like to have wasps in our gardens. And so anyway, that's what you're looking for. Most of our wasps actually are beneficial. So just a heads up, next time we do a wasp on friend or foe, probably a beneficial. But anyway, so if you have ants that are a pest in your garden, we need to talk about how to control them. This is whether they're in your garden. I'll also talk about what to do if they're in your house. So first thing you need to do is make sure you're actually working with an ant. So like I said, they can be a little bit difficult to tell. If you are looking at it, you think you have ants and you're treating for ants, but it's actually termites, you might be missing a huge problem that you need to have addressed. So definitely check to make sure you're actually dealing with an ant. And in the garden, this can become an issue as well, because for example, this summer, I had someone who thought the ants were destroying some of the flowers in her garden and they were hollowing out the stems. However, when I looked at the plant, the stems were naturally hollow. And the problem was actually crown rot related to the rain we had this summer. Ants just happened to be taking advantage of the situation after the plant was struggling. So make sure that the problem you're dealing with is actually ants. And if it is ants, then what we need to do, we can look at changing the environment. So if it's ants in your food or even in the garden, make sure that you're removing the food source. Ants are scavengers as well as predators. And so they're going to look for things to eat. And they have thousands of individuals that can go out and seek out those food sources. And once they find them, they lay a trail in order to help their sisters be able to find the source too. So we're going to talk about those two things. So first of all, you need to remove the food sources. You need to keep in the house, keep ant-attractive foods in glass or plastic jars that are tightly sealed or stored in the refrigerator. You also want to clean all kitchen surfaces and sweep or vacuum the floor thoroughly each day to remove food scraps. You'll want to probably rinse those dinner dishes and wash them daily so that you're also reducing the availability of food. You'll also want to make sure you take out your garbage can or recycling bin frequently so that reduces food sources that they have. In your house, make sure that you've gone around and you're repairing and caulking cracks and crevices where ants can enter your home. In the garden, obviously, this isn't an issue because they're just going to be there. But in your home, there definitely are things you can do to keep them from coming in. Where you have trails, you can remove those trail cues in your house by wiping with a soapy sponge. But in the garden, that's not an option. What you can do instead is you can use a strongly smelling spice like cinnamon that you can actually lay down on the trail. A soapy water trail, they're going to be able to reestablish a trail pretty quickly. A spice trail or spice control that you're using to eliminate it, that works fairly well, but you'll have to reapply often, especially if it rains. If you are dealing with a pest problem that you actually need to eliminate a colony, what you need to do is find the nest. Sprinkling some sort of poison along the trail is not really the best way to handle it because you're actually exposing more of your garden to the chemicals that don't need it. You actually need to find the nest. And this goes back to them being eusocial insects. If you just kill the workers that are out there, the queen is going to be able to lay more eggs and increase her workforce again. So what we're doing when we are using controls for ants is we're actually using their eusocial structures that they will actually, workers will find a food source, they'll bring it in, they'll share it with their sisters, and it eventually makes its way to the queen. And so the chemicals that are used actually are slow working. A lot of them will be growth inhibitors. So it makes it so that they can't keep growing, and it does, and it's a poison as well, so it kills them. But they're slow acting, and that gives the ants the time to actually spread it among their colony, so it actually can make it to the queen. In an ant colony, if you can kill the queen, you've killed the colony. So you need to keep that in mind, so that you're not trying to do something really quick, and it might actually take a little while. It might take a week for the bait to actually work. So that's really what you need to do. You need to change the situation, do some cultural controls, And then we do have a fact sheet that I'll drop in the chat where you can get more information about how to control ants, like specifically the different species that we have and also some management techniques. And of course, you can always reach out to me. So that's what I have. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tamara. Now switching gears to vegetables, our next question is on eggplants. And the question is, I have small, shiny purple eggplants on my plant. I know if the fruit turns brown or dull, it is overripe. But how can I know if my fruit is ripe now? If it is shiny, is that a guarantee of ripeness? And Kelly is going to tell us about eggplants.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Yes, so it is time to harvest eggplant. I know I've harvested some in my own garden. We have also harvested some in the Master Gardener demonstration garden here at the Botanical Center. And the first thing that you need to know about harvesting eggplant is what type you have. Probably the most popular type of eggplant is the Black Beauty, which is this one right here. That's what most people think of when they think of eggplants, but there's lots of other types as well. There's some that are kind of long and skinny. There are some that are egg-shaped. There's white ones. There's just all kinds of different kinds. So make sure you know which type that you have, and that's going to help you enormously. So really, the main thing that you need to know about harvesting eggplant is to look at the skin. You do want it to be nice and evenly shiny all over. You don't want it to be dull or anything like that. If you leave it on the plant for too long, it's going to have a bitter taste. It's going to have large seeds. So if you have an eggplant that you're suspecting is getting ready to be harvested, keep a close eye on that so that you don't accidentally leave it on there too long. But again, just look for an overall shiny glossiness of the skin. That's going to be a really good indicator that it's ready. You can also press your thumb into the skin. If it springs back, it's still immature. If it doesn't, if it's more firm, that's another good indicator that it's ready. So after you have harvested your eggplant, do keep in mind that they don't store well for long periods of time. You can store them on the counter for a couple of days if you're planning on eating them, but if you're not going to eat them in a couple of days, go ahead and put them in the refrigerator. And when you do put them in the refrigerator, it's best to wrap them in a paper towel and maybe even in a plastic bag or some kind of a reusable container, and then put that in the crisper section of your refrigerator. But even then, it's only going to last about 5 to 7 days in the refrigerator. They just don't have a long shelf life. If you're not going to use it within a week, you can blanch it and then or steam it and then freeze it, and it'll stay good frozen for up to 6 months. Do keep in mind that eggplants are sensitive to ethylene gas, and that is just kind of a ripening type agent that's given off by fruits and vegetables, such as apples and potatoes. So don't store them near each other because that can speed up that kind of decaying process. They do bruise pretty easily, so just handle with care. And the only other thing you need to do is enjoy. All right, that's all I have, Jennifer.
Thank you. And staying on the same topic of knowing when to harvest, I am now going to talk about when to pick cucumbers. All right, so here lately we've had some people either post on the Master Gardener Facebook page, or they've called our county offices asking when a cucumber should be harvested, or asking, is their cucumber over mature? So I thought I'd address it during this town hall today. And let's start by talking about slicing and pickling cucumber sizes. So if you're growing a slicing cucumber and it's a green variety, you want to harvest it when the skin is dark green if it's so I guess I back up a little bit. There are some green varieties that may not be dark green. They may be a lighter shade of green or just your typical green. So I know that there are, some variations in the color green on cucumbers. But the key here is picking them when they are about 6 to 8 inches in length. Okay, so you don't want to let them get much longer than 6 to 8 inches. For pickling cucumbers, you want to pick them when they are about 4 inches in length. And if you do pick any that are over 4, those ones can be sliced for sliced pickles. In this, or on this slide, you see some cucumbers that are over mature. These are a green variety. And as your green variety turns yellow and starts getting really large in size, those are considered over mature. Now, anyone that has chickens, you know that chickens do like to eat cucumbers. So you can slice that cucumber in half and feed it to them. I think it's important to know what variety of cucumber you actually have. And I know on the Master Gardener Facebook page, somebody posted a picture, this has been about a week ago, of a cucumber that was solid yellow, and it looked like a dark yellow. And we had a hard time, figuring out, is that over mature or is that just a yellow variety? So it's important when you're planting cucumber seeds, or if you're buying transplants to plant, that you put the label, or you make a label for the cucumbers. So I like to plant a variety of cucumber seeds, and I do have some different heirlooms that I plant. This one here is called Boothby's Blonde. And when it is ready to harvest, it is light color or light yellow, like a blonde color. So I know that it's ready when it is about 4 to 6 inches and it is blonde in color, or this light yellow color. I also grow this dragon egg cucumber, and it is nearly white when it's ready, white to a very, very light yellow like you see in the photos here. And they will look like a large egg, or maybe a large, maybe not quite as big as an ostrich egg, but they'll look like an egg, a very large egg. And they are this color. So that's typically, very normal for this variety. And then moving on to lemon cucumber, I know a lot of gardeners do grow this one. This one is ready when it is yellow, just like your standard yellow color, like you see right there in the middle. You might even pick it when it's a little lighter than that. But once it gets golden, like you see in the lower right, that is over mature. And when you cut it open, it's going to be really seedy. So you want to pick these lemon cucumbers when they are a lighter yellow, like you see in the top right would be ideal. And then this is a cucumber that I've not grown, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce some of these next ones, but just wanted to show you that here is an all yellow variety when it is ready to pick. This one is an African horned cucumber, and it is also going to be a yellow or a dark yellow when it is ready to pick. This cucumber is supposed to be a yellow or light yellow when it's ready. And this one is supposed to look like this. And I do know somebody here in Adair County that has grown cucumbers that, as far as I know, she may have grown this particular variety right here. But this is a type of cucumber. So back to knowing your variety. It is very important, like I said earlier, to make sure that you label your cucumbers, actually label all your plants. It doesn't matter what it is, label it. So when it comes time to harvest, you know what that variety is, and you know what it's supposed to look like when it is mature and ready to pick. And that's all I have on picking cucumbers. I will now turn it over to Dr. Lee Miller to give us a turf update.
Thank you, Jennifer. Holy moly, that's a lot of cucumbers. I had no idea there were that many. We're gonna switch gears and talk about the short stuff, and talk about if I can switch here. I think that probably looks okay or better. Going to talk about, Dr. Guinan talked about some of the areas that were experiencing more drought symptoms. Definitely towards Kansas City, I get a little worried about that side of the state because there is more Kentucky bluegrass grown there because it's just a little bit cooler. When it comes to our lawns, really the adage, if the grass isn't growing, you shouldn't be mowing. You're going to add a traffic stress to it. Tall fescue has a really, really good drought dormancy mechanism. Most of us have tall fescue in our yards. But when we get towards the Kansas City area, we start seeing more and more Kentucky bluegrass, and that is not quite as drought tolerant. So kind of keep an eye on that. It might need some supplemental watering. If it is tall fescue, I will tell you that it doesn't. Way back in that drought of 2012, we had areas, particularly on our turf farm, that didn't see rain for 6 to 8 weeks, and it was just as hot as it is for the next couple days. And all of those areas really recovered. Kentucky bluegrass isn't quite as good at that. So, particularly in that Kansas City area, you might want to keep an eye out for that. Another thing to keep an eye out for right now, and thanks to Robert Balick down in the southwest portion of the state for finding this, is fall armyworm. I have heard some reports of this insect pest, actually quite a bit, from the southeastern portion of the United States. This can be a problem on turf grass. It's also a problem on pastures and forages. I kind of call this the weekend problem or the Disney vacation problem, because what will happen is a homeowner will go off and you'll go off to take that last little vacation before school starts with the kids, and then come back to this. And really, as the name implies, these worms, they reproduce very rapidly and they actually march across an area. I've also seen where some tall fescue lawns will get absolutely ravaged by this, and the one right next to it won't be affected at all. We think that might have some reasoning will be for endophytes, and maybe there's some endophyte differences, which is actually microscopic fungi that are associated with the plant that make it resistant to insect feeding. This is what it looks like on the plant. Obviously they're brown. The younger ones can be green though, but this is what you'll look for. And you really need to be scouting for this. We don't want to spray insecticides willy-nilly because of our pollinators and our beneficials. But if we do have these kind of marching across, we will need to intervene with an insecticide. A very characteristic Y-shaped heads. They don't bite, so you can pick them up. They won't feed on you. But this is very characteristic. And the last time we really saw these was way back in 2014. So we think that we might have another one of these boom years this year, and it's important that we're out and scouting for them. There's a number of different insecticides that you can use. You can find these over the counter. These are the active ingredients. There have been some reports of potential resistance to the pyrethroids. And when I talk about those, the most common is going to be bifenthrin. You can find it in a number of different forms. If that is the case, we might need to go to something like acelepryn is the trade name, but that's that fifth one in there, that chlorantraniliprole. That is the active ingredient that might need to be relied on. But really, the first recourse would be probably bifenthrin, and then any of these other, spinosad also should work on them as well. So that's all that I have, and I'll send it back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Lee. Our next topic is Gladiolus, and I'm going to be talking about that. So I need to share my screen. Okay, so Gladiolus have been in bloom for several weeks now, and there are a lot of pretty colors out there this year. And Gladiolus is actually my favorite cut flower. And this really is a flower that does need to be cut and brought indoors because the heat is it's hard on it. So let's take a look at some other photos and talk a little bit about it. So gladiolus is a flower that grows from corms. And the corm is this structure you see here, sort of looks like bulbs, like daffodil bulbs. And we plant corms in May after the danger of frost has passed. Like all structures like this, like all bulbs, they need well-drained soil and full sun. So if you plant these in a wet area or a low area, they are probably going to rot and you're not going to have any flowers. And this year, even in level soil or what we thought was well-drained soil, there was still some issues because it has rained so much this year in northern Missouri. With gladiolus, you can stagger your plantings every 2 weeks so that you have a longer bloom time. And gladiolus usually bloom about 8 to 10 weeks after planting. And I have been harvesting gladiolus for the last 3 weeks. I started picking or harvesting gladiolus about the second week of, actually I started picking them, I guess, the last week of June, and I'm still getting some stragglers. So I've been picking for a month, I guess I should say. Now, these are my gladiolus, and they don't, as you see, the foliage does not look very good. It has rained and rained and rained here in Northeast Missouri in the Kirksville area. And so a lot of things that we have this year look yellow. They look really pale. And gladiolus and bulb flowers typically do not need fertilizer, at least they don't need a lot of fertilizer. But despite the foliage looking bad, I had some gorgeous flowers. And when cutting the flowers, you want to cut them as soon as the bottom flower on the spike has opened. Most of the remaining blooms will open when the spike is brought indoors and placed in water. So I cut the flowers and bring them indoors. I put them in warm water. I don't use cold. I don't use hot water. I put them in warm water. And you could use a, I'm having a brain freeze here. The mixture of stuff, the floral preservative, that's what I'm trying to think of, floral preservative. You can put them in some floral preservative if you have that. Early morning is the best time to cut gladiolus flowers. And what I've noticed is if I go out in the middle of the day, let's say I go home for lunch and I go out to check the flowers of the garden, the gladiolus that are starting to bloom, or maybe they are in full bloom, maybe I've missed one, they're just really droopy. They don't look real good, and it's because of the heat. So for a true cut flower, you really need to cut them in the early morning and cut them before they do get too mature to where they can be ruined by the heat. So here's some of the ones that I've grown this summer. I really like the orange ones. Actually, orange is one of my favorite colors. So of course I like the orange ones, but they're all beautiful. Every one, even the white ones are really pretty. And some of you may have seen my Facebook page. A few weeks ago, I said my sunroom looks like a florist shop because I have so many gladiolus that I've cut and brought in. And like I said, you really do got to bring these in because they just don't take the heat of the day, especially when we have these 90 to 100 degree days. These are some I cut a week ago. There's a really pretty orange one on the right there. All right, and then as far as the corms themselves, they are typically not winter hardy, or at least let's say not here in northern Missouri. I've had people say, well, I left them in the ground and they overwintered. And they may. It depends on where you're at in Missouri. So they may overwinter. They might even overwinter in protected areas here in northeast Missouri. But usually you want to dig up gladiolus corms, and you want to dig them up in late summer, early fall, after the foliage has died down. Shake off the soil, cut that dead foliage off to about 1 to 2 inches above the corms, and then let the corms dry for 2 to 3 weeks in a warm, dry, well-ventilated location. When the corms are dry, remove and discard the dried, shriveled corms. Some of them may actually dry and just shrivel up, and you need to throw those away. Or any that are soft and rotten, you need to throw those away. And then place the corms in mesh bags or an old nylon stocking and hang them in a cool, dry, well-ventilated location, like a basement if you have one. And that's all I have on gladiolus.
Hey, Jennifer, a question came in. Can gladiolus be grown in containers?
Actually, gladiolus can be grown in containers if you only put about 3 corms in the container. I've also experimented with cannas. You would not think a canna would grow in a container, but I have put cannas in containers and they grow 6 feet tall and they bloom. I had red cannas. So the answer is yes, you can grow flowers that grow from a structure like a corm or a rhizome or a bulb. You can grow them in containers. Just watch how many you plant. You don't want to overcrowd them.
Thank you.
Debbie. Okay, and then moving on, our next topic is actually, it says working tomato green thumbs. Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. So, yeah, so a little bit, I've got a little video that we're going to play for you here, but just a little bit of history on this video. So I have a research project this summer at the Southwest Research Farm in Mount Vernon, and we are researching grafted tomatoes. And so you may have heard of grafted trees, but you can also graft tomatoes and cucurbits, and it's actually increasing in popularity because of some of the good qualities of the rootstock. Some of them are disease resistant to certain soil-borne diseases and things like that. So we're comparing cultivars of grafted and ungrafted tomatoes in both a high tunnel and a field. And if you've ever grown lots and lots of tomatoes before, not only are they a lot of work and grow very quickly, but if you work on them quite a bit, your fingers are going to turn green and they're going to get that sticky green substance on them. So I want to play a little video for you of how to get your hands clean. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Kelly McGowan, Field Specialist in Horticulture with MU Extension. You may have noticed that if you've done any work with tomatoes, when you're done, your hands are green, and that stuff is hard to get off. So how do you get it off besides scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing? Well, you can take a green tomato, you can smash it. We're going to open this up here, and then we're going to use it to kind of wipe down our fingers. Takes a little bit of work, but you can see all of that is starting to come off. Just keep going. This is a small tomato, so you might have to have a little bit larger one, but it's coming off really nicely. Even the fingers that are heavily coated. And then you can go inside and finish it up in your kitchen sink.
All right. Well, that was just kind of a funny little video, and I know it wasn't the best video or audio quality on that, but basically if you get, that green coating on your hand after working with tomatoes, you can just take a green tomato and you can smash it and just kind of, wipe it on your fingers like I was doing in the video. And something about the chemical reaction in the green tomato and the substance on your hand, it helps it to come off easier and can help, cleanup be easier after you've been working with your tomatoes. And I apologize because I look like a sweaty mess in there, but it was in a high tunnel on a 100-degree day, and that's what happens. So, Jennifer?
All right, thank you, Kelly. And we only have a few minutes left, but I think we're going to try to squeeze in one more, and Donna Offenberg is now going to talk about bagworms.
Okay, so this is a question that I have gotten a lot here lately. I know we've covered bagworms before, but I always like to repeat sometimes the information. This time of year, our bagworms are huge. They're usually an inch, inch and a half plus. And that's when people really start to notice that their evergreens or whatever they're on is starting to really look brown and look horrible. And they start getting a closer look and they realize, oh, there are bags. Oh, what are those? And so these are bagworms, and there are caterpillars in there that are feeding on the foliage, and they're make their home in the little bags. So it's hard sometimes to notice them when they're small. And then by the time, once again, by the time they're big, that's out of control. My screen won't go. There we go. All right. So I just pulled this from Kansas State University. I wanted everybody to see how small they do get. So let's just start up here in the top left. There's a moth that flies around, lays eggs in these bags, and then they hatch and they get all over the foliage, and that's in June. So usually we start seeing them the end of May, beginning of June. And this is June, and the beginning of July is the best time to control bagworms because they are susceptible to just about anything you do, whether you're hand picking, whether you're spraying them, even as something as simple as BT, and we'll talk about that in a second, can really affect them at this stage. By the time they get to the end of July into August, on the right-hand side, that's when we really struggle in controlling them. As you can see, the bag starts little bitty, about 1/4 of an inch long, and as they age, they just gradually get bigger. And as the caterpillar gets bigger, they're eating more foliage and it's making that bag bigger. And if you look at the little tubes below, the caterpillars start out really small, and as they grow, you can see why the bags get so big. It's because the caterpillars are big. And so what do you do? Well, this time of year, because it's hard to get control, you need to hand pick them and destroy the bags. Do not throw them on the ground. Don't throw them in a bucket. Get rid of them. Burn them, send them to the landfill, do something other than just throwing them down, because they will reattach themselves to plants. Chemical control at this point is less effective, mainly because they have guts of steel at this point. When they're real small, any of these chemicals will do well. I like BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, because it is an organic chemical and it only will affect the caterpillars. Whereas if you start spraying with these others, they tend to affect other insects in our environment. So definitely you can try these by spraying it now, but odds are it might control some of them, but not all. But I say just hand pick at this point. My girls, I think they picked 200 the other day off of one of our shrubs. And so they can do a lot of damage in no time, killing things. And then the other thing that I like to really promote is at the end of the season, once the freezes happen, go around and inspect, all your shrubs. And if you find bags at that point, you can also get rid of them because they will have eggs in them. And this is when we cut open a bag, this is what you'll find in them. And it's just a really ugly worm, trust me, caterpillar. So key thing, if you find them this year, make sure to spray on Memorial Day next year. And I always use Memorial Day because it's easier to remember. And that way you're getting them when they're small. Okay, Jennifer, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes our questions and our topics for today. And Donna, I'm going to turn it right back to you to wrap it up for us.
Okay, so let me try to get this, so everybody can see this. It's not working. Give me a second. Hold on. Oh, there it is. Okay. So earlier we talked about these town halls are now live streamed and recorded, and they can be found on the YouTube website. So you can either bookmark the MU IPM website, like what's showing over to the right, or you can just go to YouTube every time and you type in MU IPM in the search box, and that page will pop up. And usually if we're going live stream, it should show it at the top of the page, and it will have a little box that says live on it. And that's how you can tell if it's a live stream. These will be recorded, and they can also be found on this website. It's further down the page, and it will also list what dates that they were recorded, so you can tell which one is which. And the other thing that you can find on this page is all the snippets that we've had over the last 2 years. So it's a great page to go and just browse around and watch the different videos. So definitely take a look at that. Just keep in mind, we're meeting every Wednesday at noon. So future dates, August 18th, August 25th, and September 1st. It's hard to see that September is already showing up on the calendars. It's just amazing how fast the year goes. And just remember that if you have a question to ask for a future town hall, you will have to go back to the registration page and ask there. And that way we get the questions weekly and we can answer those questions during the town hall. During the other times of the week and throughout the month, just remember that you can contact any of us with questions, and we are more than happy to help any of you. So thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.